How's it going, guys? My name is Dom, and today I'm going to be showing you how to create your very own multi-action button using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. All right, so this right here is going to be the button itself. As we can see, I can click on the right side here and receive this new menu of extra related options. All right, so this is perfect if your user is most likely going to click on the primary button here, but you want to give them access to a few extra related features of the primary button. So these all work, and it's very straightforward to create something like this. I'll be leaving the source code down below if you want to download and follow along while you watch today's video. And we're going to be starting from scratch inside this HTML page right here. Now, we're going to be using the Google Material Icon library to give us access to those icons, in particular the save icon right here, and of course the arrow downwards for the menu. So I'll leave a link to this down below in the description, as well as the usage guide for those icons. All right, so in order to actually start using those icons on your web page, you need to simply go down here to this setup method number 1 and copy this link tag. All right, so you want to then paste this inside the head of your HTML right up here, and now we can begin to use those icons on the web page. Right, so that right there is the very first step. I'm now going to show you the HTML, then the CSS, and then lastly the JavaScript for creating this multi-action button. All right, so beginning inside the body right down here, we can create a new container for our multi-action button. We can call this, or we can make this a div with a class of MAB, short for multi-action button. All right, I might also just call this MAB, throughout this video. Now, inside this container, we can now create a new button. All right, so this right here is going to be the primary button. We're going to give this a type of also button. Now, you may wish to make this a type of submit, okay, if this right here is inside a form and you wish to save the form changes. But in many situations, you're probably going to want to have button here, but it's up to you guys really in terms of that attribute right there, okay? Now, the class for this button here is going to be mab __ button. All right, so I'm going to be using the block element modifier naming convention for this video. But basically, this just means, look, we have the mab. Okay, this is the main, component here, the mab. Then you have this button, which is like a subcomponent of your main one. Okay, so you got the block and the element. All right, so the mab button class is going to be applied to all of our buttons here. But this one here in particular is going to be the primary button. So let's add a second class here of -- primary, just to indicate that this one here is in fact the primary large button. All right, cool. That's also called a modifier. Okay, just so you know. Now, dropping down here inside the button, we can now create or start using those material icons. So we can do this by using a span with a class of material - icons and a second class of mab __ icon. So of course, giving out a new class to our icon element right here. Now, this class of material icons is set by the Google Material Icon library, and you provide the icon name inside the span itself. So in this case, I want to use the save icon. Going back inside the on the actual documentation here, or the library itself, we can do a search for save. All right, we have the save icon right here. If I click on it, just like this, if I click on it, we have these options, and we can see here, we can just copy that save, or just type out save, and that is the name of the icon. So we can put save inside here. I'll save this now, go back in the browser, do a refresh, and we get something like this. All right, so the icon is working. A second span underneath the primary is going to have a class of mab __ text. This one here is going to be the button display text. Of course, we can just make this save changes, go back in the browser, and we get this right here. Cool. We can now move on to providing a second button for the actual menu on the right side. This one right here is going to also have a type of button. I'll just copy this over, as well as a class of mab __ button. So the same stuff right here, but of course this one, we have a second class. The modifier now is going to be -- menu instead. Of course, This is now the menu button, all right? Inside the menu button, we can simply copy this span for the icon and paste it back, and we can use the icon here called expand more. Okay, so back in the documentation here, if I type in expand more, we have this icon right here. Cool. Do a refresh here and we get something like this. All right, so now we're going to stop in the HTML and move on to the CSS. All right. Going up inside the style tag right up here, we can begin by simply targeting the class of map. Now, we're going to give this a position of relative. This is going to be used in order to display the list of extra options in the bottom right corner. So more on that later on, as well as a background of a light gray here. We can use D. We can also give this a display of inline dash flex. Now the reason for flex here is so we can easily create a 2-column layout for the 2 buttons. So we have this space, as we can see here. If I save this though, go back in the browser and refresh, that space is now gone, of course, due to that display of flex. So everything is tight together. Okay, cool. That is all for the container itself. We can now begin to style up those buttons. All right, so we can target the map __ button class and give all of these buttons a background of none, a border of none, a display of flex, and align items of center and a justify content of center. I'll just stop here. So basically removing the default background and border and using these flex properties here to simply center all of the icons horizontally and vertically, as well as the text. Okay. So back in the browser, refresh, and we get something like this. As we can see, everything is now centered perfectly, horizontally and vertically. All right, cool. Going to apply some padding as well. So we'll just say here a padding of 8 pixels top and bottom and 12 pixels left and right. Remember, this stuff here applies to both of these buttons right here. So those 2 buttons right there. A color of very dark gray for the text and borders, if any, and a cursor of pointer. Save this back in the browser and we get something like this. All right, so looking not too bad so far. We can now drop down and create a pseudo class for when the user hovers over those buttons. We're going to simply apply a darker background. We'll say background equal to RGBA 000 and then 0.05 for a 5% opaque black background. Save this back in the browser, refresh. Now we get this hovering action, of course, on those 2 buttons right there. Cool. We can now target the primary button specifically. Okay, so when it comes to our large primary button here, so -- primary, we can simply set a font size here of 14px. All right, so I've sort of set this here, and to be honest, on second thought, we can probably just put this font size on the button itself. So apply this to all the buttons. So my mistake, guys, sorry about that. We can remove that class definition right there, go back in the browser, refresh, and we get the same thing. Looks like 14px is the default. So in that case, let's just remove, well, we can keep it there, but for simplicity, I'll remove it. You guys can include a font size if you want. So sorry about that, but we're all good now. We're actually going to target essentially those icons now. So for the map icons themselves, okay, we're going to add some space because of course they're way too close to the text right here. So inside here, we're just going to say, look, we're going to say margin -right of 8 pixels. Save this back in the browser and we get something like this. Now what this has done is it's now created extra sort of space on the side here. So it might be wise to actually say, look, let's actually target every icon inside the primary, okay? Or even better, we could say, let's target every single icon that is not a child of the second or the menu. So I'm gonna say here, -- menu, then say, hold on a sec, what's going on here? Sorry, any button which is not, okay, not the menu button, okay, So basically, this here is going to target the primary button. Now, the reason why I've put this here and not just said, primary is because we're going to have secondary buttons for the list. So we're going to say here, look, any button which is not the menu button, let's say for that icon, add a margin right. Back in the browser, refresh, and we keep the margin here, but not on the right side. So that's that one, okay? Now, more on this later on when it comes to the secondary buttons, make more sense. But we can now drop down here and we can say mab__text and simply apply a different text for, a different font family for our button text. So we can say here font family of Radex Pro, and then sans serif as the fallback. So save this back in the browser, refresh, and we get something like this. So looking pretty good so far, all right? We can now go back in the HTML and begin to define the markup for the list when you click on the menu button. So going back inside here, we're going to hop down below these two buttons and create a new div. This div here is going to have a class of mab__list. All right. So for this list container right here, it's going to contain a bunch of buttons. So we can simply copy this button right up here. Okay. Gonna now give this a modifier of secondary instead of primary. So this is where if you got an icon here, you want space between the icon and the text. All right. That's why I've said anything other than the menu and not just primary. Keeps it a bit simpler, right? Cool. So we have this list, we got this button, okay? We have the secondary class applied and we're basically done with this. So I might just remove the icon, right? And I'll just say here something like save draft instead and make a second button or secondary button, which says make a copy. I'll save this, go back in the browser, refresh, and we get something like this. All right, so we obviously need to do some work to make this look like what I showed you right here. So going back inside here, this is all going to be CSS. All right, so because we used a position of relative on the container, we can now begin to use absolute positioning inside the list. All right, so we're going to target the mab list here, okay, and give this a position of absolute. So now everything is going to be relative to the parent container. So with that being said, we can say top 115% and a right of 0. I want to save here, go back in the browser, refresh, and we get this right here. So we're basically 115% from the top of our container. So 100%, 115-ish around here, right? Cool. And of course, we're in the bottom right corner, giving us that, or due to that right of 0. Okay, cool. Let's give this a padding of 5px, top and bottom, and 0 for the left and right, as well as a background of white. Okay, if you don't include this background of white, then you're going to, of course, you might see transparency in the background for anything that is not white. And lastly, a box shadow here of 0, 0, 2 pixels RGBA, 0, 0, 0, and then 0.2. I'll save this, go back in the browser, refresh, and we get something like this. And of course, we have a problem here, and that is that essentially any button that is not the largest one in terms of width is going to have, its sort of side cut off right there. So to fix that, we can target the secondary class here. So mab button secondary under the primary right here. Where is it? It's not there anymore. Apologies. Let's just drop down here, right? We're going to target that secondary button. So for this one, we can give this a width of 100%. I'll save this, go back in the browser, refresh, and we get this here. So it's good. We fixed that problem. But now because we have the default center to justify content, we need to actually get rid of that. Okay. Now go back inside here. We can say justify content, flex start. So now we can see the text is going to go from being centered on a refresh to now left aligned. So if you do like that centered, then keep it, but it's up to you guys. So we are done with all of the CSS when it comes to creating this multi-action button, all right? So now let's apply some JavaScript to, of course, make it all work. First though, I just want to go back in the CSS real quick and I want to turn off the lists by default. So we're going to go inside here. We're going to say a display of none. So now back in the browser, they're going to be gone when the page first loads up. Now, to make this work, we're going to have a modifier class on this list, okay, to say -- visible. So now we're saying, look, when the visible class is applied to the list, we're going to display this as the initial value, okay? So this one here is going to essentially cancel out that display of none. I'll save this, go back in the browser. I'm now going to select the list right here and give it that second class of -- visible. Press enter, and we can see it's going to appear. So JavaScript is going to be the one that is going to be, of course, toggling that class on and off to display our list. All right, so let's go inside the text editor once again. We have the list turned off by default, so I'll minimize all of the HTML here and head inside the JavaScript. All right, so I'm just going to use an open and closing curly bracket here just to contain all of our multi-action button code. All right, it's up to you guys if you want to do this or not. Now, dropping down here, we can now define a new block of code just for enabling all the menu buttons. So we can say here, enable all menu buttons. So we're going to make these buttons here work, these menu buttons, right? So for this, we're just going to say document.querySelectorAll. We're going to be selecting every single multi-action button container on the page. We're going to say for each, so for every single multi-action, okay, we're going to define two constants, all right? So the first one here is going to be a constant called menu button equal to multi-action.querySelector, selecting the first element with a class of mab button _ menu. So of course, selecting that menu button from within inside the multi-action container, okay? The second constant here is going to be the list itself, okay? So this one here, multi-action.querySelector, the class of mab _ list. So when I click on the menu button, I want to, of course, apply that modifier class to make this visible. Menu button.addEventListener, when you click on that, we'll simply say here in the callback, list.classList.toggle, and we'll simply toggle here that class of mab _ list -- visible. Okay, I'll save this, go back in the browser, refresh here, and now click on the menu button, and it's gonna, of course, display our list. If I click on it again, that toggle is now going to remove it, as we can see right there. The problem is we don't get that list hidden when I click elsewhere on the page. So to achieve that, let's go back inside here now. We'll say hide all lists when clicking elsewhere on the page, okay? For this one now, we can simply say document.addEventListener and add a new event listener or a click event on the whole document itself. So when you click anywhere on the document, including the actual list itself, all right? So anywhere in the document, all right? We have to check, okay, we click somewhere. Do we need to close all of the existing open lists, all right? So const keep open equal to false. I want to by default close all of them. We're going to change this very soon, but for now, I want to show this functionality, right? We'll say if keep open, then return. So if this happens to be true, then we're going to cancel this function right here and don't move forward. Like I said, this can be true very shortly when we actually apply some logic to this boolean here. Now, if we don't want to keep it open, All right, we're going to say document.query selector all. We can select every single mab __ list on the page, and we can say here for each one of those lists, okay, for each list here, we'll just copy the class lists method right here and change toggle to be remove instead. I'll save this, go back in the browser, refresh, click on this, and this happens, right? So we're unable to open up that menu. Now, the reason is because this right here, this event listener of click is firing off because this button is part of the document. So it's going to fire off. And that's saying, let's hide or, remove that class. Now, of course, this one here is toggling it, but it's removing it straight away, which is why it's not appearing. So as an example, I'll simply force or manually apply that class here visible, click on this again, and it goes away. Let's do it again one more time. This time we'll actually click elsewhere on the page. So -- visible, go elsewhere, and that also works. So we need to apply some logic inside here to actually make that menu button work in the first place, and also prevent clicking on the extra options themselves and removing that list. So for this one, we can just say here, okay, cool, e.target.matches and pass in here mab __ list. So E is going to come from the event right up here, the actual click event. So the target is going to be the element which you clicked on. If, for example, you clicked on the actual list itself, then this right here is going to be true because your target matches the selector with a class of mab __ list. Okay, that's our first thing. If you click on the list, then we're going to keep it open. All right, or e.target.matches mab __ button -- menu. If you click on the menu button, then we're going to keep it open. The problem is, right now, if I click on this, I'm actually clicking on the icon. So this matches is not going to pass because, of course, the icon doesn't contain the class of button -- menu. So optionally, or what you should do is add a third, a third rule here to now say, okay, map button -- icon. So if you click on the menu button or an icon, then it's gonna keep it open, keep that drop down open. So now go back in the browser, refresh here, click on this, and it's gonna work. Click elsewhere and it goes away. Click on the icon and it doesn't work. So let's try and figure out why. Of course, needs to be mab _ icon instead. All right, let's try it again now. Refresh, click on the icon, and it's going to appear. If I click on the icon again, though, it's going to go because, well, it's actually the toggle that's being applied now. So that toggle up here is now applying that and, of course, hiding that class. Now, problem is if I click on this icon, it's not going to go away because, of course, this is also a mab _ icon. So to fix that, we can simply say, instead of matches, we can say closest here, closest, and say menu. So this closest here is checking if the element that you clicked on has a parent with a class of menu. So if it's contained within the menu, okay, if it's contained within the menu here, so the icon, for example, then we're gonna, of course, keep the, keep those things open, right? Cool. Go back in the browser right here, refresh, okay? Click on this and it's fine. Click on it again over here and it also goes away. So that's all working perfectly fine. Cool. Now, that's it, I think. Yeah, I've just got a bit confused. Hey guys, I apologize, but yeah, that is completely it for this project here, or this button. Now, just to sort of prove this works, I just want to add some event listeners to the buttons here. So I'll say on click, and we can just say here something like alert and say primary, okay? And another on click for our secondaries. So we can say save draft, and we can say here make a copy. Okay, save this back in the browser, refresh, click on this, and we get that, cool. Click on this, and we get that, and so on. And that is all for today's video, guys. Hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, drop a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.